In the very early days of baseball, forfeits were pretty common. A big reason for that was things were not very organized. There were often fights between players, fans, and umpires, and before lights, games ended early. And sometimes teams just didn't show up, or they left early, such as the Baltimore Orioles leaving a game early so they could catch a train. But as baseball became more organized, forfeits became newsworthy because they were rare. And here are the few times they've happened since 1920. You can see how different things were with this first one in 1920. The Chicago White Sox were leading the Philadelphia Athletics 5-2 in the second game of the doubleheader at Shibe Park, and with 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th inning, Philadelphia sent pinch hitter Lennis Stiles to the plate, and he tapped a weak ground ball along the first base line. Chicago pitcher Dickie Kerr picked it up and tagged Stiles, apparently ending the game, but umpire Ollie Chill ruled the ball foul just before Kerr touched it. Back then, it was common for fans to walk across the field as soon as the game ended, so when the tag was applied, thousands of fans started streaming onto the diamond, believing the game was over. Philadelphia police tried to round everyone up and push them back behind the outfield fence, but the crowd refused to leave. Instead, they decided they would just wait in the outfield for the final out to happen. Outnumbered, the police just gave up. Umpire Brick Owens walked out to try to persuade the fans to return to their seats, but he was pelted with garbage. Chill asked Connie Mack for help, but Mack just shrugged, as if to say, "What am I supposed to do?" With no way to clear the field, Chill had no choice but to declare a forfeit in favor of Chicago. As a final act of frustration, the fans who were still in the stands threw seat cushions onto the field at the people who refused to move. Though baseball became more organized, fights and brawls of course never stopped. And in 1924, the New York Yankees and Detroit Tigers met on Friday the 13th in Detroit. Just a few weeks earlier, these teams had already fought at Yankee Stadium, so tensions were pretty high. In the top of the 9th inning, the Yankees were ahead 10-6, and Babe Ruth stepped in to lead off, and he had to duck away from a head-high fastball thrown by Tigers reliever Burt Cole. And after he fouled out, he warned the next hitter, Bob Musial, that he'd seen Ty Cobb in center field signaling Cole to throw at him. As Musial got ready to bat, Detroit catcher Johnny Basler yelled at Cole, "Come on now, don't be afraid to get it close to his head." Cole didn't go for the head, but he drilled Musial in the ribs with his first pitch. Musial started toward the mound, but apparently not very quickly because home plate umpire Billy Evans managed to hold him back. And Babe Ruth was furious. As both benches emptied, Ruth sprinted out and began screaming at Ty Cobb. The two stars of Clashing Eras already disliked each other, and it looked like they were about to fight until the umpire and Yankees manager Miller Huggins stepped right between them. Meanwhile, the on-deck hitter Wally Pipp was standing nearby holding his bat. Cobb claimed Pipp was trying to provoke the Tigers by waving his bat around, but Pipp insisted he was actually trying to calm everyone down. Ruth, Musial, and Cole were all ejected, but to get to the clubhouse, Ruth and Musial had to walk to the Tigers' dugout, and the Tigers couldn't resist yelling insults at them, and Musial finally snapped. He took a swing at Detroit infielder Fred Haney, and suddenly both teams are fighting on the Tigers' bench. According to one account, Pipp even threw his bat into the middle of the brawl, which of course didn't help, and at that point, fans rushed the field, some of them even throwing chairs at Yankee players, and there was no way for this game to continue. Umpire Billy Evans then declared a forfeit in the favor of the Yankees and called for police to help clear a path, so the team could escape to the clubhouse. Afterwards, American League President Ben Johnson suspended Musial and Cole and fined Babe Ruth $50, and accounting for inflation, that is equivalent to $8 trillion. In the days before stadium lights, Major League Baseball teams sometimes went to extremes to beat the Sunday curfew, and one could be found in this 1935 game. The St. Louis Cardinals had already beaten the Philadelphia Phillies 7-2 in the first game of a doubleheader, a game delayed by rain for nearly an hour and a half, and the second game started at 5:36 p.m., giving them less than 90 minutes before Philadelphia's 6:59 p.m. Sunday curfew. The Gas House Gang Cardinals immediately jumped on the Phillies for 5 runs on the top of the first inning, and with Jesse Haynes pitching well for the Cardinals, the Phillies decided their only chance was to stall until the clock ran out. So it turned into a bit of a joke. The Cardinals' Pepper Martin half-heartedly tried to steal second base, and he made it easily when catcher O'Grace lobbed a throw to second. Joe Medwick singled Martin home, and he hoped to be tagged out at second while trying to stretch it into a double. But the shortstop Leo Norris just stood there holding the ball as Medwick crept on to second base in pure disbelief. Phillies manager Jimmy Wilson was thrown out of the game after he dragged out a pitching change as long as he possibly could. In the 5th inning, Leo DeRocha grounded to Leo Norris, who would fire the ball straight into the Phillies' dugout. Then came yet another slow-motion pitching change, and by now, umpire Bill Clem was losing his mind. According to the Philadelphia Inquirer, he was frothing at the mouth like a mad dog, running from player to player, shaking his finger in their faces, and spouting words of liquid fire. When Phillies reliever Phil Johnson finally came in, he threw his first pitch over Pepper Martin's head, but Martin swung anyway to keep the game moving. Johnson's next pitch wasn't even close to the plate, and DeRocha would score on a wild pitch. And that was the final straw. Clem marched over, and told home plate umpire Ziggy Sears to declare a forfeit in favor of St. Louis. And afterwards, Wilson was asked if he ordered his team to stall, and he said, "I ain't saying nothing." But he added that if the Phillies were guilty, then the Cardinals were too because they had swung at everything and refused to run out ground balls. National League President Ford Frick didn't buy the excuse, and he fined Wilson $100. And because the game was forfeited before it became official, none of the hitting stats counted, and Joe Medwick lost credit for his home run. He would end up tying for the National League home run title. One of the unsung heroes of baseball is the grounds crew, and their importance was shown in a 1941 game in Washington, D.C. In the 5th inning, a steady drizzle started falling, but the game continued, with the Senators leading the Red Sox by 3. And by the 8th inning, the rain got heavier, and the umpire would finally order a delay. He asked for the field to be covered, but there was a problem. The Griffith Stadium grounds crew had vanished. The umpires searched everywhere, but they could not find them. And after a short break, the rain let up for the players to warm up, but almost immediately, the rain started to pick up, and the delay stretched on for 40 minutes. And finally, the umpire came back out, stuck his toe in the muddy baseline, and declared the field to be unplayable. And because it was past the 5th inning, the game counted as official, with the Senators winning the game. Boston manager Joe Cronin was not happy. He filed a protest, arguing that the Senators were negligent by failing to cover the field during the rain delay. And American League President Will Harridge agreed, and on August 27th, he overturned the results and ruled the game a forfeit to Boston, stating that the rules required the home team's ground crew to be available at all times. Senators owner Calvin Griffith, who also happened to be Cronin's father-in-law, was upset. He claimed the umpires never even asked manager Bucky Harris to get the field covered, so then how could they refuse? He was also upset that Harridge issued the ruling without speaking to anyone from the Senators organization. Even the Cleveland Indians, who were battling Boston for second place, asked Harridge to reconsider, but Harridge wouldn't budge, and a week later, he officially declared the matter closed, and the forfeit would stand. This is one I discussed in a previous video about promotions gone wrong, with Scrap Metal Day. It happened on the next last day of the 1942 season at the Polo Grounds, and the game itself didn't matter much, and fewer than 3,000 fans would buy tickets. But 11,000 kids got in for free by bringing scrap metal to help the war effort, and they would drop off 56 tons of scrap metal, including the rusted hulk of an old car. But that is not what is remembered. Warren Spahn was making his second career start, and he didn't pitch very well. Over the first 7 innings, he allowed 5 runs on 10 hits, and he walked 5 batters. And as he went out for the bottom of the 8th inning, the day took an unexpected turn. As the kids thought the game was over, thousands of children suddenly poured out of the stands and onto the field. The New York Times described the scene as a maelstrom, a hopeless, tangled, confused mass, running helter-skelter all over the field. Umpires Ziggy Sears and Tommy Dunn tried to restore order, and they went into the Giants' dugout and called the press box to make an announcement, warning that the game was in danger of being forfeited. But the crowd noise drowned out the message. With no way to clear the field, the umpires declared the game a forfeit loss for the Giants, even though they had been leading 5-2. Because of the way forfeits were scored, all the individual stats still counted, but there was no official winning or losing pitcher. That's why Spahn's rookie season stat line is bizarre, as it shows no wins, no losses, and somehow, one complete game. A weird start to his Hall of Fame career. And as already seen, even as baseball became more organized, fans venting their anger did not go away. In 1949, during the second game of a doubleheader between the New York Giants and the Philadelphia Phillies, with the Giants leading 4-2 in the 9th inning at Hyde Park, New York's Joe LaFada hit a line drive to center field. And Richie Ashburn made a tumbling attempt at a shoestring catch, and he was sure he caught the ball cleanly. Phillies pitcher Schoolboy Rowe insisted that the third base umpire called it an out, but the second base umpire ruled that it was a trap. A run scored, LaFada ended up with a double, and Ashburn lost it. As Ashburn ran in to argue, the Philly fans in the bleachers began pelting the field with bottles and produce. Public address announcers pleaded for the crowd to stop, but the fans just booed louder. After about 10 minutes, it looked like things were calming down as the fans seemed to run out of ammunition, and for a moment, peace seemed possible. But as the Giants batter Bill Rigney stepped into the box to resume play, the barrage started all over again. One fan hit home plate umpire Al Burlick in the leg with a tomato, and the other umpires were targeted with bottles and more fruit. And after a brief conference, Barlick waved his arms and declared a forfeit in favor of the Giants. Phillies manager Eddie Sawyer didn't agree, calling it a stupid decision by the umpire, also saying it was the worst day of his baseball career, and could have been avoided with the right call, saying the umpire was the only one in the park who didn't see Ashburn catch the ball. Police arrested 2 men for departing the chaos. One was fined $25, the other, a 54-year-old man, had his case dismissed for a lack of evidence. Meanwhile, police couldn't track down a mysterious fan who reportedly launched at least 100 bottles, supplied by a small group of helpful young women. And the next day, Connie Mack Jr., the Philadelphia Athletics assistant treasurer, announced that Hyde Park would stop selling drinks in bottles. And from then on, every beverage would be poured into a cup before being handed to fans. Many of these games seem to involve Philadelphia teams on both ends, and here's another. Cardinals manager Eddie Stanky fired Terry Moore after the 1952 season, and it's no surprise Moore didn't take it well. Moore once said to Stanky, when he loses a ball game, he acts more like a 9-year-old than a man. The tensions died down until they faced each other as opposing managers a year and a half later. Moore had just been named manager of the Philadelphia Phillies, while Stanky was still leading the Cardinals. And there was obvious tension, with Moore saying, if there is one man in baseball I want to beat, it's Stanky. On July 19, 1954, the Cardinals and Phillies played a long, hot doubleheader, and a thunderstorm delayed the first game by nearly 90 minutes. But neither the temperatures nor the tempers cooled off. In the 5th inning of the second game, with the Phillies leading 8-1, and dust setting in, the Cardinals believed National League rules prohibited turning on the stadium lights after a game had started. And that was a mistake, as they actually could, but no one was aware. So Stanky began stalling, and it was a repeat of 1934, only the two teams switched roles. Cardinal pitcher Cott Deal appeared to deliberately miss the strike zone by wide margins, and after one pitch came close to hitting Phillies first baseman Earl Torgeson, the umpire warned Deal to stop delaying. But when he returned to home plate, he found Torgeson nose-to-nose with St. Louis catcher Sal Evars, and these two had history. In 1952, Torgeson had accused Evars smashing one of his bats, so to even the score, Torgeson smashed Evars' face. As the benches cleared, Moore rushed to home plate to try and stop things, and he pulled Evars away from Torgeson. Then Stanky snuck up on Moore, and he wrestled him to the ground. And Moore used this chance to punch Stanky at close range. He ended up with a scratch on his neck and a black eye. Meanwhile, the game clock was ticking. After order would be restored, Stanky slowly walked to the mound and called in a relief pitcher. But as the pitcher made a slow way from the bullpen, the umpire had seen enough, and he declared the game forfeited to Philadelphia. The St. Louis fans, already frustrated with Stanky's poor management, actually cheered the decision. Stanky would end up being suspended for 5 days, and he was fined $100, while Terry Moore did not face any punishment. Though Stanky initially blamed Moore's pregame comments for the fight, he later apologized publicly after a stern lecture for the National League president. It's one thing for fans to get mad at a wrong call, but it's more understandable for them to get mad at ownership for betraying them. In 1971, nearly 15,000 fans paid, and 4,000 more crashed the gates to say goodbye to Major League Baseball in Washington, D.C., and to vent their anger at team owner Bob Short. Short purchased the Senators for $8 million in '69, but things quickly went downhill. The '69 Senators, managed by Ted Williams, gave fans hope by finishing 10 games over 500, but some bad trades for some veterans led to a 96-loss season by 1971. And on top of that, the Senators were charging the most for a ticket. And in September of 1971, Short announced he was moving the franchise to Arlington, Texas, which of course devastated the loyal fans. That night, dozens of anti-Short banners appeared and disappeared around the stadium. One side reading the Bob Short fan club hung over an empty section. Fans in the left field upper deck dangled 2 long banners that read, "Short stinks," and then the next one said, "Short still stinks." Fans even hung a small dummy of Short from the upper deck, which earned a standing ovation. Despite the bitterness, the crowd watched an exciting game. Washington trailed 5-1 in the 6th when Frank Howard hammered a pitch for a home run, which led the crowd to cheer for 3 full minutes, as Howard, who once vowed to never tip his cap to the fans at RFK Stadium, made 2 curtain calls full of tears, and his homer sparked a rally. Washington took a 7-5 lead in the 7th, but then the situation started to spiral. The 8th inning was delayed when 3 fans ran on the field to shake the player's hand, and after being removed, about 60 more fans rushed the field. And by the 9th inning, Ted Williams was worried about his player's safety. He pulled Howard from the game and told his relievers to leave the bullpen and head straight to the dugout. And after the first 2 hitters were retired in the top of the 9th, fans would storm the field in force, running the bases, digging up home plate, and tearing down the scoreboard for souvenirs. And Frank Howard didn't blame them, saying this was their night. They'd been hurt, disillusioned, and they're the greatest fans in the world. The umpire waited 3 minutes, he saw the chaos was unstoppable, and declared the game a forfeit, ending nearly a century of professional baseball in the nation's capital that of course would later return. Maybe the manager most synonymous with ejections was Earl Weaver, and it's no surprise that he was also the center of a forfeit. The Orioles, just 2.5 games behind New York in the AL East, were trailing the Toronto Blue Jays 4-0 in the bottom of the 5th, when Weaver took issue with a tarp covering the Blue Jays bullpen mound outside the left field line. The night before, Orioles left fielder Andres Morris stumbled on the tarp while chasing a foul ball. Citing player safety, Weaver demanded the umpire crew order the Jays to remove it despite the steady rain that was falling. They asked the grounds crew to remove the cinder blocks holding the tarp down and fold back the tarp slightly, but said he lacked authority to order its complete removal. Unhappy, Weaver waved his arm and ordered his team off the field. The Orioles quickly gathered in the clubhouse and unanimously stood behind their manager. And after a 5-minute wait, the umpires declared the game forfeited to Toronto. and the Orioles were outraged. General Manager Hank Peters promised to make his displeasure known to American League President Lee MacPhail. The losing pitcher Russ Grimsley called the forfeit a big bunch of garbage, adding the umpires have got it in for Weaver. The Blue Jays were a bit confused themselves, with this an important game in the midst of a pennant race. Manager Roy Hartsfield said, "I don't understand Weaver's thinking. What about the 25 guys who have a chance to win the championship? Was he thinking about them?" And as it turns out, he was. The next day, Weaver admitted he believed his team had a better chance to win if the American League overruled the umpires and ordered the game finished the following week, when the Blue Jays were scheduled to visit Baltimore, saying we might not have gotten to bat again. It was raining so hard, their pitcher was throwing breaking balls, and the wind was blowing in at 30 miles per hour. A chance is all we got, but it's a better chance than we had of winning last night. Ultimately, MacPhail upheld the forfeit, and the Orioles finished the year tied for second place with the Red Sox, but still 2.5 games behind the Yankees. So it didn't matter too much. And this game makes it easy to see why bullpens are on the field anymore. One of the most infamous moments in baseball history comes from 10-cent beer night. By the mid-1970s, unruly fan behavior was becoming more common in baseball. Houston outfielder Bob Gallagher said, "It seems like everybody in the outfield stands is either young kids or drunk old men." Many teams, however, were encouraging it with promotions for cheap beer, but none was more infamous than 10-cent beer night. The game between the Texas Rangers and Cleveland Indians was going to be intense, as just a week earlier, the teams had brawled in Texas. The Cleveland players needed to be held back from charging into the stands after being pelted with beer and insults. And before the June 4th game, Cleveland fans booed Texas manager Billy Martin, who only made things worse by tipping his cap and blowing kisses to the crowd. More than 25,000 fans showed up, double what was expected, and security included just 2 city police officers and 50 stadium guards. Fans started running onto the field as early as the 3rd inning. One woman tried to kiss the home plate umpire, and a streaker dashed the outfield in the 6th inning. And as the game wore on, and more than 60,000 10-ounce cups of beers were sold, the mood shifted. In the 7th inning, someone threw firecrackers near the Rangers bullpen, causing their relievers to flee. The Indians relievers did the same a half inning later. By the 9th inning, the Indians had rallied from a 5-3 deficit and had the winning run on third with 2 outs. And Billy Martin knew his team was in trouble. And suddenly, a couple of fans jumped the fence and attacked Rangers right fielder Jeff Burroughs. Burroughs tried to escape and fought back, but more fans swarmed him. Players from both teams, some wielding bats, rushed to help him as hundreds of fans poured onto the field. And it turned into chaos. Players and umpires scrambled for the clubhouse, while debris and drunken fans rained down them. A metal chair thrown from the stands knocked Cleveland pitcher Tom Hilgendorf unconscious, umpire Nestor Chilek suffered a cut hand from a flying chair, and Texas pitching coach Art Fowler, blind in one eye, was punched and fell down the dugout steps. And Billy Martin said he saw people armed with knives. And of course the game could not continue, and was forfeited in the Rangers' favor. Afterwards, Martin called Cleveland manager Ken Aspermonte to thank him for the team's help, even though the two teams had just been at each other's throats days before. 9 people were arrested, and 7 had to go to the hospital. And now beer prices at games are much higher, only so they can avoid this. And no other reason. And really the most famous forfeit comes from Disco Demolition Night. Disco Demolition Night was the brainchild of Mike Veeck, son of White Sox owner Bill Veeck, and Steve Dahl, a 25-year-old Chicago disc jockey. All summer, Dahl had been pretending to blow up disco records on the air, and his listeners loved it. So on this night, between games of the Twilight doubleheader, he would do it for real. Fans could get in the park for just 98 cents, a nod to 97.9 FM, if they brought a disco record with them to give. Though anti-disco feelings were strong, at first, Dahl was worried the event would flop. But he need not to worry, as when game time neared, there was a surge of people making their way to Comiskey. White Sox reliever Ed Farmer remembered fans jumping on the roof and the hood of a Camaro to climb through ventilation holes in the outfield wall. One fan said it looked like medieval times when they go after a castle. Conservative estimates put attendance at 50,000, with maybe 10,000 more milling outside. And as recalled, it wasn't the typical baseball crowd. A columnist said, most of these people have never seen a baseball game before, and they probably never will again. And he said it didn't smell like a typical crowd either. As he said, marijuana was all over the place. The promotion was more successful than imagined, so much so that they stopped collecting records as the bins were full. And throughout the first game, they let fans start throwing records like they were frisbees. Ed Farmer said, each inning I went out to pitch, the disco records were being thrown from different parts of the upper and lower decks. One flew by me and landed near third. Another rolled to me, and I caught it with my glove on the mound. The Tigers won that first game 4-1, and then came the main event. Dahl took the field and blew up his records amidst a downpour of cherry bombs and beer. And after exploiting the records, about 5,000 to 7,000 fans poured onto the field. They weren't really violent, but they dislodged home plate, tore up grass in front of the mound, and one guy sprayed the fans still in the stands with an industrial-sized hose, with the worst injury being a broken ankle. It took about half an hour before helmeted police arrived, but by then, most had left on their own. About 1,000 people remained on the field, and the cops cleared them in about 5 minutes, with 39 people being arrested. The field actually wasn't in terrible shape, but Tigers manager Sparky Anderson refused to play the second game because of the excessive delay. Umpires then called the second game. Initially, the game was supposed to be made up later that weekend as part of a doubleheader, but American League President Lee McPhail stepped in and awarded the Tigers a victory by forfeit. This is still remembered as baseball's most infamous promotion and went a long way in disco declining in America. And our last one here is the most recent forfeited game, and there's a chance it could be the last we'll ever see, that being Ball Night. A sellout crowd of 53,000 people showed up to Dodger Stadium, and the night also had a promo. Fans received souvenir baseballs as they entered the stadium. That would prove to be a problem. Everything was fun until the 7th inning, when some fans began throwing their souvenir baseballs onto the field. Play resumed after a 6-minute delay, but that was just the beginning. In the bottom of the 8th inning, with the Cardinals leading 2-1, home plate umpire Jim Quick ejected Dodgers first baseman Eric Karros after protesting a called third strike. In the bottom of the 9th, leadoff hitter Raul Mondesi struck out in 2 borderline calls, and he complained, and he was also ejected. Then Tommy Lasorda rushed out to defend him, and he was ejected too. And at that point, Dodger fans lost control. They started firing baseballs and other items from all parts of the stadium. Dodgers outfielder Chris Gwynn was hit in the head with an apple, and Cardinals right fielder John Mabry said, "I wasn't too worried until a bottle of Southern Comfort flew out of the stands and hit me." And when a bottle of rum followed, Mabry asked the bat boy to trade his hat for a helmet, but the bat boy said no, as he was also in danger. The Cardinals retreated to the dugout as fans calmed down and stadium staff cleared the field. But just as the players returned, another baseball landed in center field. The umpire then immediately forfeited the game to St. Louis. And as usual, fingers are being pointed. The Cardinals blamed the Dodger fans, with some claiming 200 to 300 balls were thrown in the 7th inning alone, although Dodger officials said it was about 200 for the entire game. The Dodgers blamed the umpires, and the umpires blamed Lasorda. First base umpire Bob Davison said, "Lasorda instigated the whole damn thing by running out there, waving his fat little arms." That forfeit almost ended up being costly, but the Dodgers won the division by 1 game. As hard baseball souvenirs are no longer a thing, and Disco Demolition Night was not the last of its kind. So as forfeited games became less rare as baseball became more organized, that didn't stop them from just going away. And it was much of the same stories. Tensions rise between players, or with umpires, and fans follow along, sometimes going too far. And then there's the promotions. They started to become a little more wild around mid-century, and sometimes they worked too well, which was a bad thing in some situations. But as MLB has become even more organized, has more safety precautions, and the ability to reschedule games, there has not been a forfeited game since 1995, and it will take unique circumstances for it to happen again. And you can watch my video about promotions gone wrong, some talked about in this video, for more.